Okay, so we still have some people getting on. But I wanted to welcome everyone to our February Lunch and Learn. This is the parent version of the provider forum that Dr. Olive did last week. We are going to be sending out the handouts after the fact to everyone that attended, as well as the link to view it on Zoom for you to share. So while we're getting on, I did want to introduce Dr. Olive. I'm gonna get my cheat sheet. Okay, so she is the Chief Clinical Officer at Adapt for Life ABA and previously served as the Chief Clinical Officer of Cultivate Behavioral Health and Education following the acquisition of her company. She's published over 30 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters focusing on assessment and treatment of challenging behaviors, communication intervention, and feeding disorders. So I'm going to let Dr. Olive kind of welcome and give a little more information about herself before we start. And
I have to unmute. I did have a cheat sheet if you want to pop up the slideshow. I reordered it after we did it last week because I was like, oh, I think I would like this slide here.
okay, let me go ahead and
share your screen. And wow, it's just so exciting to see how many of you are here today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come be with us. And let's see, Dina, if you want to go one more. When you get this old, you forget all the things that you've done. So I thought I'd just give us a little snippet. I have been doing ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis Therapy, since I was about 12. My brother was born in 1979, and he was quickly diagnosed with a seizure disorder, and then later diagnosed with an intellectual disability, and then even later than that, autism spectrum disorder. I describe him as someone who has profound autism. He's nonverbal, and he's also one of the two loves of my life. I am licensed to practice behavior analysis in 5 states. I lived in Connecticut for 13 years prior to coming to the great state of Florida. So I was licensed there. I went ahead and got licensed in New York, which was an adjacent state, and I worked with quite a few kids in that state as well. I had a parent call me from Louisiana and needed me to do some work with her child in Louisiana. So I got licensed there. And then Cultivate was in Texas, and having lived in Texas for 10 years prior to going to Connecticut, I got licensed to practice in Texas. And then I most recently added Kentucky to the list because Adapt for Life is in Kentucky and Indiana. I will get an Indiana license as soon as they promulgate those rules because their licensure law passed in 2019. I'm going to be working hard with the Florida Association for Behavior Analysis and trying to get us a license for Florida as well. So I say the profession chose me, not me choosing the profession. My mom learned to do ABA before Mac was even 2. We drove 45 minutes in very rural Tennessee to get to a place that could provide services. So just do the math, right? That was 1981-ish. And so 45 minutes in the car was quite the haul, especially when my brother was the baby of 5 children. So she schlepped us all up to this facility where other parents trained her to do ABA, and then the service was free. And then she, after years of learning, turned around and provided parent training to other parents to do ABA. So we've been doing this a very long time in my family. I still say that my brother teaches me more than any textbook. Yes, I have a PhD. Yes, I'm a board certified behavior analyst at the doctoral level. I've published lots and lots. I'm a peer reviewer for journal articles to approve other articles going out, but nobody taught me what my brother has taught me and continues to teach me. I became his guardian when he was 13 years old. I thought I knew everything. For those of you that are actually parents in the room, I'm sure you understand sometimes professionals think they know everything. And I had my master's degree and I called my mom and I'm like, he needs to come live with me because I'm in the big city of Nashville and and I know everything. And so my mom was like, okay. So she let him come move in with me, and it schooled me real quick about how much I didn't know. And so we lived in Nashville together for a year. And I decided that I wanted to get my PhD because, in fact, I didn't know everything. And so I called my mom again and I said, you know what, I'm going to move to Minnesota to get my PhD. Do you want him to go with me? And she said, sure, take him. So Mac and I together moved to Minnesota. He was 16 at the time. And I encountered a lot of things, becoming the instant parent, with my mom multiple miles away. And so he went on with me to my first position as a professor at the University of Nevada, Reno. And it was there that our mom had a heart attack and passed away. And it took us a very long time to get back to Tennessee. She was on life support, and I decided that Nevada was too far away. So I started looking for jobs closer and found a professor position at the University of Texas at Austin. And so Mac and I packed up and we moved to Austin, and we stayed there for almost 10 years. Texas, like Florida, doesn't necessarily support its residents. And so they did not have any in-home support for him to stay with me. And so that was his move into a group home in Texas. And he proceeded to be the recipient of many instances of abuse and neglect. As you all know, those of you that have loved ones that are older, our loved ones are very vulnerable and very much at risk for abuse from the caretakers that are being paid to take care of them. He had a broken arm in 2 places. He's had his ears boxed by someone to the point that he looked like he had cauliflower ears. He has a broken leg that he walked on for a period of time that no one even noticed that he was limping. I could go on and on and on. So after our 9 years and some change in Texas, we relocated to Connecticut. Connecticut also didn't have the supports to allow him to live with me, but they also didn't want to provide the supports for him to live somewhere else. And so I fought the system. And you know what happens when you fight the system? They fight back. I had to go to court to maintain my guardianship over him. Connecticut tried to take it away from me. They literally took physical custody from me, and I spent $12,000 fighting. Eventually, the co-guardian approved me to be his guardian. If that meant laughable, right? That I had cared for him for all of these years, and I had someone have to tell me whether I was qualified to care for him or not. We were in Connecticut for 13 years, and we landed in Florida in July 1st of 2022, just in time for the big hurricane. Florida, as you all know, doesn't provide a lot of care either. And so we entered the very, very, very long waiting list of services in Florida. I quit my job at Cultivate to provide 24-hour care for him. Between July when we got there and January when we were able to move him into a residence, he had 54 seizures, 5 emergency room visits, 1 hospitalization, and lots of problem behavior. I called every ABA company in the Naples and Cape Coral area, and none of them took anybody over 18, and most of them did not take anybody over 13. It was very concerning to me. And so when we finally did get him placed, he was there for a couple of months before he fell and fractured his hip in 3 places. I don't even know if he fell or if he was pushed or if he tripped or what, because I never got an incident report and no one can even tell me what time of day it happened. So he went to the hospital and came home to my house again to rehab. We found another facility, and I will proudly tell you it's a Sunrise facility in Cape Coral, and my brother has not had a single accident or injury since entering that facility. So I'll scream from the mountaintops of the care that he's getting there. That all comes back to Adapt for Life found me and offered me a position, and we don't have an age cap on our services. We provide services to anyone who has the medical necessity and the and the financial coverage for it. We take Medicaid and we take all other commercial insurances, and we have school district contracts. And it thrilled me to be able to come work for a place that will serve all individuals that need behavior support. So when you look across my life, I was a sibling, I was a student, I was a professor, I was a researcher, I was an ABA practitioner, a business owner, and now a business executive. And I am committing my life to helping make sure that everybody that needs applied behavior analysis can get it, but also that the quality of what they get is appropriate. The other thing that's happening in our field is that we've grown really fast. And so people who need ABA aren't necessarily getting access to high quality ABA. All right, I'll let you go to the next one, Dina. Thank you. Sorry for that long introduction. But the youngest one in the room is the person that I've been talking about. So that's Mac. On the far left of your viewing screen is my brother, Matt. He has a birthday later this week and will turn 50. He's going to fly down to Florida and come celebrate with us. And Mac is so excited that his brother's going to come to Florida to see us. To your right, which is the right person right after me, is our brother, Mark. He is a couple of years younger than Matt, and he is the backup guardian for Mac should something happen to me. And then on the far right is our father. We lost him in October, so it's still a pretty fresh wound for us. And then we had another brother who's not in the picture because he passed away when he was 15. And that's Mike. He was our oldest. All right, if you want to go to the next one. These are the two men in my life, the two men that I love more than life itself. And so that's my husband, Norm. I like to call him my silver fox. And then that's Mac. It gives you an idea. Mac is standing up and Norm is sitting down. He's a whopping 4'10", and he weighs a whopping 85 pounds on a good day. He is really not drinking bourbon, but it sure did make for a good picture. Our goddaughter lives in Kentucky, and my husband loves bourbon, and so we went to a bourbon tasting, but it sure made for a good picture of my two loves. We did not let him drink. So FABA, which I mentioned earlier, I also serve as the executive director of FABA, which is the Florida Association for Behavior Analysis. It is a chapter of the Association for Behavior Analysis International, and we're an affiliate of APBA. Dina, I have to tell you that my board is voting as we speak to become an affiliate member of the ARC of Florida as well. So hopefully that board vote will go well. And we will also be an affiliate of the ARC of Florida. But we are here to protect the profession, to promote the profession, and to make sure that individuals who receive ABA receive so in an ethical and humane way. We have an annual conference that we've been having for over 30 years. It is now hybrid thanks to technology. So anyone that wants to attend can attend without having to have the expense of a hotel room. But our main purpose is to promote the profession. I have to have my disclaimer, and today I'm here as Missy Olive, Dr. Missy Olive, and not as FABA's executive director, and certainly not as the chief clinical officer of AFL. Those are things that I do. They're jobs that I have. But everything I say here today is coming from me and none other than me. So we're going to talk just a little bit about some of the myths that you may have been hearing about ABA. My PhD advisor, Dr. Mary McAvoy, was actually on the plane crash with Senator Wellstone. Senator Wellstone was instrumental in passing what's called the MAPIA law, the Mental Health Parity Law, and that allows people that have behavioral needs to have all the services that they need, just like they would get all the services that they need if they had a medical need. And so my advisor taught me early on about some of the myths. I've adjusted them ever so slightly because times have changed since, my days of being a PhD student. After we talk about the myths, we're going to roll into some very, very basics of ABC. I don't want to get too technical on you, but I do want you to understand why your loved one may behave the way that they behave. I'll throw in a few other terms just so you can have them and take them home with you. If you want to dig in more, you can certainly watch that other training that I did last week because it is way more technical than we're going to go today. But I am going to talk about what you should expect from any ABA program and what those services might look for or look like. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. Okay, so let's start with the top 10 myths. We'll try to do it David Letterman style. A lot of people think that the goal of ABA is to remove problem behavior. So we have 3 goals. We want to increase good behavior, decrease problem behavior, but we also want maintenance and generalization. So it's not okay if I just fix the behavior in my presence. I need to fix the behavior when they're with you, or when you go to the grocery store, or when you go to church, or when you ride the bus, or any other time. So we have multiple goals, but decreasing problem behavior is just one of them. A lot of people also think that ABA is bribery. And last week when I had the providers, I asked how many of them work for free, and no one raised their hands because people don't work for free. People work for payment. It's not bribery, it's your paycheck. And so when we talk about reinforcement programs, we like to compare it to a paycheck, that when you do this behavior, you get that consequence. We do not want to be in a situation where someone is having a tantrum or having a meltdown, and we say, hey, if you'll stop, I'm going to give you some candy, or hey, if you stop, I'm going to get you that favorite toy. That is bribery. So instead, what we want to do is say, hey, I want to teach you how to ask for a break. I want to teach you how to ask for more. I want to teach you how to ask for some gum in the Target line. And you know, Target, Publix, and all of those stores, they do things on purpose. They put all of that fun stuff right there in the checkout lane because they know you're going to be there with your kid. And they know that your kid's going to say, I would like a Reese's peanut butter cup. I would like a Coke. I would like some bubble gum, right? And they know that you're going to say no because we're all on a budget and we can't afford everything our kids always want. And then your kid's going to have a meltdown right there in the Target line. And what are you going to do? Oh, most people would give them what they want to make the behavior stop. That's bribery. We're not going to do that. You know what I do? Out we go. We're not buying anything and we're leaving. And we'll come back another day to get those items. There's some great chats happening too, Dina. If you want to go to the next item and then maybe chat in the chat. Some people think that ABA is just for people with disabilities and better yet, just for kids with disabilities. And I'm here to tell you, ABA works great on your spouse. It works great on your adults, other adults in your life. We use ABA actually in the job place. So it really works with everybody, but it has to be implemented properly. You can't run around and provide reinforcers without having some sort of plan and without having a professional, the professional training. In fact, that's why we want licensure in Florida, because we don't want people pretending to provide ABA when they may not be qualified to do so. There is a slide in a few slides that we're not going to activate because we don't really have time today, but it's a hot link to a YouTube video by Sheldon. It's a Sheldon and Penny. And if you've never seen The Big Bang Theory, you won't get it, but Sheldon is quite funny. And, you know, while he never had an official diagnosis of ASD, I would argue that throughout the show, he presents like someone that might have ASD. He's super smart and also super rigid and wants rules and wants everybody to follow his rules. And he doesn't like Penny, the neighbor across the hall who's dating his roommate. He doesn't like Penny talking during his TV shows. And so he decided that he was going to implement an ABA program of giving her chocolate when she stayed quiet. And so she would be chatting away and he would say, chocolate? And Penny, of course, loved chocolate because he did the right thing by picking the right reinforcer. And he reminded her, you know, to shush, be quiet. And she's like, oh, zip, right? She zipped up her lip and she ate that chocolate happily. And then the phone rang and she's going to take a call from her friend and she's talking with the TV on and he dangles the chocolate and she takes the chocolate and she takes the phone call outside. And eventually when she leaves the room, the boyfriend is like, Sheldon, I know what you're doing. You're using the principles of behavior analysis and you're trying to reinforce her her behavior. And Sheldon takes the chocolate and says, chocolate? Because he's going to reinforce Leonard for getting the answer correct. Sheldon is practicing ABA without a license, and we really don't want that to happen, but it is pretty darn funny, and it's a great example of principles of behavior in action with people without disabilities. There is some rumors happening on the internet. In fact, there are people being targeted directly on the internet. We have stories of moms who have been threatened with their life for allowing their child to receive ABA. These people that are speaking claim to have a diagnosis of autism, and they claim to speak for everybody, and they claim that all ABA is abusive. And again, we all know that doctors have abused their patients. We know that police officers have abused people that might be incarcerated. We know that these things do happen, but that doesn't mean that every policeman is a bad guy. It doesn't mean that every doctor is a rapist, right? All ABA is not abusive, but people have been abused. We know that. My brother has been abused in the name of therapy. And so what we want to make sure is that people get access to quality ABA that is not, does not have abusive ingredients in it. And when we get to the end of our slide deck, I have a list of things that you should look for if you decide to go down that path of getting ABA for your loved one. ABA providers make all of the decisions. This is also a myth, although I have been hearing that this is happening. This is not appropriate. The decision-making is the behavioral provider and the parent/guardian. The ABA provider should never make those decisions on their own. They always make those decisions with the parent and guardian. That includes prioritizing what you want to work on, prioritizing what your child is good at, prioritizing what your child needs together. And so anybody that walks up to you and says, this is what we're going to do, you tell them that you want to choose a different provider because they're not providing quality ABA. Now we're down to one more click, Tina. The ABA is a bag of tricks. So ABA is a science, and there are a series of procedures that we use often and regularly and planfully and thoughtfully. And while it might look like a bag of tricks because it doesn't look like science to you, it should in fact be planned out. I do have a cartoon in a few slides that really portrays the need to plan and to implement and to also take data to make sure that that your program is making progress. Some people also claim that ABA was created by Lovaas, and what I can tell you is that Dr. Lovaas was the first person to take the science and apply it intensively with children with autism. He initially actually tested it out on adults with disabilities. He had funding in the state of California, and he actually made a lot of progress with those adults. But when the intervention stopped, so did the progress. And so he had the brainy idea of why don't we provide early intervention early while their brains are still forming and see if the skills will maintain. And in fact, that is what happened. So he promoted the use of intensive early intervention to teach skills to help individuals progress later in their life. But we've now replicated those procedures on individuals with Down syndrome, on individuals with intellectual disability, on individuals who are nonverbal. And we have many, many, many studies showing that ABA works across a wide variety of ages, across a wide variety of age ranges. It's about developing the program and planning for that maintenance and generalization part. So there is a myth that ABA uses shock and other aversive procedures. I would be lying to you if I told you that my brother's never had an aversive procedure way back when he was little. So we finished the ABA training program and my brother enrolled in school. At the time, you couldn't start school until you were 4. Now, under the IDEA, which is the special education law, you can actually start school at age 3. But at the time, you couldn't start till you were 4. And so we stopped going to the 45-minute away location, and we started taking him to school. But first, my mom, went to the school, and they said, "Oh, Mrs. Oliver, we don't take 4-year-olds. We take children when they turn 5." And so my mom, this is probably where my advocacy started. My mom called the state director of special education and sort of complained. And within minutes, the local director of special education called my mom and said, "Oh, Miss Olive, we must have had a miscommunication. We do take 4-year-olds." And so my mom said, exactly, and enroll my brother in school. During that time, he had a series of behaviors because, again, he's still nonverbal. He has some signs and some pictures. He uses his iPad to communicate. But when you don't have a way to communicate, problem behaviors actually serve as the communication. And so he was a real good communicator by spitting, by hitting, by smacking his head on the floor. And so we had a psychologist come in and continue to help us manage his behaviors. And that psychologist had us do aversive interventions because that was all he knew at the time. In 1982 or 83 or 84, we didn't understand what we do now. And today we're going to talk about some of those other strategies that are way better than punishment. But we were shaking a can of coins in my brother's face. We were squirting him with lemon juice. And so a few years later, the psychologist called me and he said, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry that I told you to do those things." And I said, "It is okay. You didn't know better," right? Today, if someone's using shock or if someone's using lemon juice, it's not okay because we know better today. We know not to do those things. And we have a whole series of other interventions that we can use. And so the ABAI took a position. They have a public position statement that they are opposed to electric skin shock. And so anybody that tells you that we use that, they are not being truthful. Anybody who is using that is providing bad ABA, and they need to be reported to the authorities for criminal behavior. ABA can always solve any problem. I'm here to tell you it cannot. It's very effective with behaviors that we can see, behaviors that we can count, behaviors that we can measure, but we don't deal with things inside the head. A very, very, very close family friend of mine developed late onset bipolar disorder in the manic type. She was 72 at the first evidence of the behavior. 72 years old. She never had a single behavior problem in her whole life. And all of a sudden, she went into a manic episode and doing behaviors that we've never seen her do before. That is not something that ABA would try to tackle. That is the job for a psychiatrist. So someone who specializes in those types of behaviors. So we can't solve any problem. And we can't learn about ABA just by reading about it. Any of you that want to learn more, you shoot me an email and I'll help you get connected to like hardcore courses, because the 40-hour training program for registered behavior technicians is free and it is available out there on the internet, and I can help you find it. And so you can learn a lot more about ABA and how to do it right. Okay, so I am going to do just a little bit of scholarly talk here because I do think it's important for you to understand why your loved one may have problem behaviors. So setting events are triggers. They're things that might set you up to have bad behavior. Sometimes I find myself hangry. I do a thing called fasting and restricted eating, where I don't eat until a certain time of the day. And that's when I consume all of my calories. And that changes from day to day, depending on how hungry I am. And so it's not uncommon for me to hit the 12 o'clock mark, which we're now at 12:30. And I find myself to be very, very hungry. And then I get angry at the same time, hence hangry. And so missing meals might be a setting event. But we also know that sleep is a huge trigger for many, many people. And so lack of sleep could be a trigger for problem behavior. We also know that anxiety can be a trigger. And so when you enter into a condition that makes you anxious, then your behaviors are going to be more than they would have been if you weren't anxious. Another setting event might be a headache, right? Oh, like I have this headache and now I'm grumpy. So we have to remember that there are setting events out there that influence behavior. But there's also something called an antecedent. So the antecedent is the thing that happens right before the behavior. So if you've got a headache and then someone brings a horn and they turn on the horn right in your ear, you're probably going to have a pretty strong reaction to it because you have that headache and then you have the horn and then you probably have a meltdown. That is an example of the way that the events happen in our environment. So antecedents happen right before the behavior and consequences happen right after the behavior. And that's where we get the ABCs of behavior: the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. Now, so here we have the ABC again, but in a slightly different order. Setting events are not on the screen anymore. So when we have an antecedent, a behavior, and a consequence, behavior does one of those things that we already talked about. Behavior either increases, it decreases, or it stays the same. When it stays the same, it's called maintenance. And I can't get generalization because it's three-dimensional. I can't get it on my graph here, but generalization is when that behavior happens in other environments. But when the behavior increases, the definition is reinforcement. That's what's been proven with science over and over again. When the behavior decreases, it's called punishment. Keeping in mind that these things happen even when you don't mean for them to happen. You can accidentally reinforce a behavior and you can accidentally punish a behavior. Sometimes we think we're giving a punisher and it actually backfires and serves as reinforcement. We see this a lot with attention seeking, right? So a kid maybe hits a kid at school and the teacher comes over and gives them all this attention. And next thing you know, they're hitting the kid again. And here comes the teacher. And it's a really effective way to get attention. Just today, I was talking with a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, and she's having trouble getting her notes done. And we're a medical provider and you have to write your notes. Your doctor writes notes. We have to write notes. And so we're like, why can't you get your notes done? And she said, well, I took some data yesterday and I got interrupted 17 times. And I said, 17 times in a 1 hour session? And she said, yes. And I said, well, it sounds like somebody's behavior is being reinforced. So her RBTs are running to her, like a kid runs to their mama, and they're getting all kinds of attention from her. And I said, meh, no more. You need to stop reinforcing that behavior. And you tell them you will come to them. They can't come hunt you down. So she was accidentally reinforcing their behavior by helping them when they didn't really need help. Okay. There are two kinds of reinforcement, two kinds of punishment. We really don't have time to go into depth. Oh, Dina, we do that. Yeah, there. We don't have time to really go into the depth of what's the difference, but I will give you a trick word to help you remember. In math, please don't leave the webinar now, just because we're talking about math. In math, when we have a plus sign, we use the word positive, right? It's a positive integer. When we see the negative sign, we use the word take away or negative. And so the plus and minus means go back to that consequence. And was the consequence added or was the consequence removed? And let me give you an example. If I love Starbucks, go to Starbucks on a regular basis, and all of a sudden Starbucks gives me an app and I can use that app to get my coffee faster and I don't have to wait in line, that's going to increase my behavior, right? The consequence is added because Starbucks makes me getting my coffee faster and perfect happen more and more. So Starbucks positively reinforced my behavior. If you've got a baby at home and they're learning how to eat, so they've moved from milk to table food. And so now you've got your peaches and you come in with your peaches and the kids, yummy, yummy, yummy. And now you come in with the green stuff, the broccoli. As soon as you come in with the green stuff, the kid's going to be like, no kid likes green things, right? So now they're doing the no behavior And what do? You take the broccoli away and you come back with peaches and the kid is happy. Now you come back with broccoli again and they're like, no, they're having a fit. You remove the broccoli. So the act of removing the broccoli reinforces this behavior, which becomes the no, no, no behavior. And that's how babies learn how to reject things. And so that's negative reinforcement. Negative does not mean bad. Negative means math, take away. I don't like punishment. I'm not going to advocate for punishment, but I am going to let you see what a positive punisher is and what a negative punisher is. So back in the day, guess who got spankings? This girl. I was raised in an era where parents spank their children. And in fact, some of you may still spank your children. I'm not dead either. The spankings weren't terrible, but the addition of the butt swaps, right? Or the belts or the switches, or for my mama, the house shoe, right? Those are all added to me. They were added to the environment to decrease my behavior. That's positive punishment. So giving a spanking, a whooping, a house slip or beating, those are all examples of positive punishment. Do they feel positive? Heck no. But the word positive is about the plus sign. We're adding a consequence to it. Now, let me give you a negative consequence. Those of you that ever had a teenager with a cell phone, then you know what this behavior means. Because when they're naughty, you say, hand it over, and you take the cell phone. You're taking away something they love. And it's a negative punisher, not because it feels negative, and it does, but also because you're taking something away. So that's how you know the difference between a positive reinforcer and a positive punisher, and a negative reinforcer and a negative punisher. Thank you, Dina. So I think that we can kind of slip right past that slide because I already elaborated on that one. I'll give you just a couple more examples of positive and negative reinforcement. We'll see if you learned, right? You pull up to the stop sign, you see the stop sign, and you stop the car, and you avoid a car accident. You avoid a speeding ticket. You avoid hitting a child on the bicycle. Negative reinforcement because you're avoiding something or something was taken away. When you sit down at the restaurant, the waitress comes up, you see her, you order your food, and you get your food like you ordered. That's positive reinforcement. You drank too much over the weekend, and so you got yourself a little headache. You pop some aspirin, and then your headache went away. The headache is removed. You take aspirin because it's negatively reinforced. And finally, maybe on the flip side, you wake up, you drink your coffee, and then you feel good and you're ready to go. Positive reinforcement, okay? And then I have a few more applications to your students or to your children. In the bottom right-hand corner, the parent's on the phone and the child's acting a fool. You have to stop. You have to get off the phone and tell them to stop their behavior. So now they have your attention. That is positive reinforcement. But let's look at the kids sitting at circle time and they're like, flop, flop, flop. They hit their peer and teacher goes, that's it. You're out of here. Go to timeout. And off the kid goes. And they go to timeout, and timeout might be, in a room by themselves. And if you have autism, that's great because you don't like being with people. But it might also be at the back of the room where there's all kinds of trucks and cars and fun things to play with. So now we're giving the kids something they want because they were naughty, and we think we're sending them to timeout, but we're giving them what they want. And so it's a perfect example. If your teacher says, I'm doing timeout and it's not working, there's a reason why it's not working. All right, let's go to the next slide. And that's, if you keep the PDF that I put in the chat and that Dina's going to send out later, all you have to do is roll your mouse right over that, and it'll take you right to the Sheldon Big Bang example that we talked about earlier. And then this is just a nice little slide that shows you all the words that I just taught you. Now, in the other talk, I went through each one of these things and taught people what they were, but because you're parents, I don't know that you want that level of detail. I did see that someone was interested, so before we hang up, I will put in the chat the link to the Autism Partnership Foundation free 40-hour training. And then you just need to line yourself up with a BCBA in your area and start volunteering or learning how to apply those procedures with individuals to become certified. I'm sorry, Dina, I paused and you brilliantly moved on, but I just want to say a couple more things. So these are all interventions that have been proven with research. These are all interventions to increase desirable behaviors. And so reinforcement is the word I've taught you. We use it and we also fade it down to typical levels. We do not want to do edible reinforcers unless there's absolutely nothing else that your loved one will work for. Ideally, we work for praise, high fives, and other easy to administer reinforcers. We prompting should always be gentle. Prompting should always be the least level of prompting. We don't want to force children to do anything or force your loved one to do anything. My brother's a classic example. I could just pick him up and make him do whatever. He only weighs 85 pounds. But that doesn't teach him anything. So we want to teach him to do what I ask him to. And he's had so much ABA, I can literally just like this, close my eyes, and he will pop up and do what I need him to do. Because that to him, me closing my eyes is, dude, you're not getting any attention until I do what I need you to, until you do what I need you to do. We also use a technique called shaping, which is it's a little harder to implement, but believe it or not, some of you probably have already done shaping as a technique in your life. We also do task analyses and we teach chained behaviors, and toothbrushing is a perfect example. There's like 26 steps in toothbrushing. And so we'll break it all down step by step by step and teach people how to do those steps together. And then of course, modeling, and that's where we show people the behavior that we want them to do. You can go forward, Dana. In the area of modeling, we can actually have video modeling too, which has proven to be incredibly effective. After trying to fly by the seat of his pants, Fred learned that good teaching requires good planning. The author of this cartoon is Michael Greco, and he's an amazing special educator that lives up, I'm going to say it's either New Hampshire or Vermont. He's way up there in the north. And he has a whole bunch of cartoons that talk about special education, that talk about applied behavior analysis. And I find him to be point on, right, for every single cartoon. So we have a few that we're going to do together. But earlier I said, you can't fly by the seat of your pants. This is not a trick that I pulled out of my sleeve. It requires planning, implementation, and also data collection. Hey, Patty, do you want to play ball? And Patty proceeds to prompt herself to say yes. And the observer says, what's that odd behavior? And the teacher said, oh, she's nodding yes. And those are the physical prompts that I used. And then the joke is Patty's teacher returned the book on ABA before he read the chapter on fading physical prompts. And so while we might start with a physical prompt to make sure they learn how to do the behavior, you would never end on physical prompts because we need our loved ones to be independent. We need them to learn all of these behaviors without someone doing it for them. So the next thing that you do after you identify your top priorities, you actually have to write goals together. And the family should be at the table identifying the priorities. And so the BCBA will help pick those goals with you. They should not pick them for you. They pick them with you. Now, if your health insurance is paying for it, sometimes health insurance will not cover certain things. Health insurance will not provide coverage for teaching academics. Health insurance, in some of them, don't even want to teach your child to toilet train. They want you to teach your child to toilet train, but health insurance will cover parent training so that we can help you teach your child to toilet train. It just depends on the kind of insurance you have and the kind of coverage that's included. But your school could also be providing ABA services to tackle some of those goals. It should be a developmental progression. We don't want to be teaching a 2-year-old their phone number. That's not functional. Instead, we want to teach a 2-year-old to ask for help or to share information or to request more of something. And then we'll teach that phone number, when they get to be the age of 6, 7, or 8. That's a much more appropriate level for that behavior. We want to teach things that are immediately useful in our loved ones' lives. There's no point in teaching them something to get them ready for the next environment because they need to use it today. They're not going to maintain it. They're not going to generalize it if we don't teach something that's immediately useful. I've said this, I'll say it again. We need our loved ones to be independent. And so we want to focus on what can we teach that will help them be independent. People like my brother do require lifelong care, but the care is cheaper if he can do some things himself. And so it's important to teach those. They do also need to be socially significant. We don't want to work on silly things like learning the capitals in the 50 states if they can't get dressed. Getting dressed is way more important than knowing the capitals of the states. And then we also target goals that are culturally appropriate. We had a BCBA that we had to reteach because she was trying to force a child to use a fork. And I said, did it ever occur to you that in that culture, they eat with their hands until they learn how to use chopsticks? And she looked at me like I had 12 heads. And she goes, yeah, but we eat with a fork. And I said, well, that family doesn't. And so we need to teach the child to do what their family does. And that's what makes it culturally appropriate. So this is an example for those of you that still have loved ones in school. We sometimes write objectives that are not useful. And so this is the perfect example. Oh, he says, I knew I should have paid more attention to the conditions with that objective. And so Carl changed the conditions to be given a sidewalk without an open manhole. Jim will walk safely home from work. So in this example, right, Jim's blind and learning how to navigate with his cane. And if you don't know how to teach the individual to survive in their environment, you're definitely going to have mistakes like this. So it's important to know the environment where these behaviors need to be observed. Oh my goodness, what happened here? Oh, says the teacher, I guess we used too low a criterion. Many IEP objectives are always at 80%, when in fact, we need some of them to be 100%. Toileting is a perfect example. We need the child to be 100% accurate when they're toileted, just like we need them to be 100% accurate when they're crossing the street. Oh, Mrs. Worthy, I hope you like our computerized individual education plans. They allow us to have all of our students' goals be the same. Mrs. Smithfield fails to notice the contradiction. An IEP is just that. It's supposed to be individualized. Every treatment plan that a BCBA creates is supposed to be individualized. And that's why you, the parent or guardian, need to be involved, because you know your loved one better than anybody else. I didn't even ask if we had any siblings in the room. I'm going to bond if there's siblings here today. Hey, what are you doing with our student data? Oh, when I started, it was raw data. It's still not done. This is the perfect example that not only do you have to collect data, but you have to graph it so that you can actually use the graphs to inform your progress. So when we talk about decreasing behaviors, because we do that too, right? We increase behaviors, we decrease behaviors, and we want maintenance and generalization. When you need to all open up your loved one's behavior plan, and your loved one is entitled to a plan that is based on reinforcement first. You should not ever introduce punishment into the plan until you have demonstrated repeatedly that reinforcement alone is not effective. But your loved one needs an assessment. You cannot write a plan if you haven't assessed the behavior first. And so that's your key. And then your plan is built based on the assessment. So your provider should give you choices of interventions to see which one would be easiest for you to implement. We have a lot of interventions to choose from that all work on problem behavior, but they need to match the reason why your child is using problem behavior to communicate. And so the assessment is called a functional behavior assessment. You probably have heard it called an FBA. And we certainly don't have time today to go into how to do an FBA. There's a very, very lengthy process, but it definitely needs to have 5 steps in it. The first step is where they interview you and get your understanding of the behavior. The second step, they need to observe your loved one. The third step is not required, but sometimes might be necessary. And that's where they manipulate the environment to see if they can manipulate the behavior. Sometimes just providing extra attention can cause behavior to stop. And then they develop the hypothesis. So is your child attention seeking? Is your child trying to get out of work? Is your child trying to get access to the computer? And then they ask themselves, question number 5, can I give them what they want? 9 times out of 10, they are already getting what they want. And so, yes, we should be able to honor it. Some examples of when we can't honor it, the need to take seizure medication. We can't let you skip your seizure medication. We also can't let you have alcohol in most cases, so we're not going to let you do that. One of Mac's roommates was a coffee lover, and we were out of decaf. We had him over for Christmas, and we were out of decaf, and he cried and cried and cried when we told him that he couldn't have caffeinated coffee. He didn't understand, and it broke my heart. So when you write that plan, the plan is actually for the adults. The plan tells us what we're supposed to do. It's not for the child. It's developed about the child or the adult who is maybe having behavior problems, but the plan is for the other adults in the environment to implement. And the treatment plan, so for adults, right, they might have an individualized service plan, an ISP. In school, they would have an IEP, and then infants and toddlers have an IFSP. So all those letters are what they're working on. The behavior plan is for us. So enter positive behavior interventions and supports, which is what we should be doing. And again, we don't have time to stay here for very long, but I'll tell you that PBIS is it's an ABA-based intervention. It focuses on teaching independence. It focuses on teaching communication skills. It focuses on making sure that we have data collection. It focuses on making sure that we have interventions designed to meet the purpose of the behavior or the function of the behavior. If you want to just just blow through those. The last thing I was going to say, we do a lot of practical interventions. We shouldn't be having a fancy intervention that no one knows how to implement, because if you don't know how to implement it, you're not going to be able to implement it. And of course, continuing to be socially and culturally appropriate and getting that maintenance and generalization, that is so important. So it is not the same plan for every child or every loved one. It is not a form that you do in a meeting, and it's not a piece of paper that you file away. And it certainly should never, ever include restraint or seclusion or shock or any of those other terrible things. So John Herner has a quote, and I don't exactly have the year for it. In last week's talk, I didn't even have his name. And so I've done my research and pulled up this quote. If a child doesn't know how to read, fill in the blank, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. But if a child doesn't know how to behave, sadly, we punish. And so we want to make sure that we teach, because in PBIS, instruction has to happen. We have to teach your child or your loved one what to do. In this example, Rodney is caught with his pants down, writing IEP goals without family input. Again, I cannot stress, you need to be at the table driving the goals and the priorities for your loved one. So we know that ABA can come in a wide variety of formats. You can have home-based care, you can have center-based care, you can have school-based ABA. No matter where you get your services, you're either going to have comprehensive ABA where they're working on everything from the, top to the bottom, or you might have focused ABA where you're working on one or two things. For example, if I'm coming in to do a feeding program to teach your loved one how to eat, that's a focused program and we're just learning how to eat. If I'm doing a toileting program, that's another example where I'm just focusing on that one thing. And occasionally we might do something called school consultation. The ASD guidelines were originally developed by the BACB. The BACB is the people that credential me and credential the RBTs. The BACB passed these guidelines over to CASP, and the link to get them is right there. And they're right now, they're called the CASP 2.0 guidelines for ABA. I'm expecting the 3.0 version to come out any day, but for now, that's the most recent update, and that is all the standards that are supposed to be visible in a plan. This last slide that I'm going to show you all before we hit a few questions, CASP has clearly told us that any ABA program is going to have BCBA oversight. If there's not a BCBA, you should not have an ABA program. The procedures should be implemented by trained providers. An RBT is not required, it's preferred, but they definitely need to be trained before they work with your loved one. Data collection, I've said over and over, it has to have some data collection to know if what you're doing is working. You make frequent program adjustments. If something is not working, you change it. You don't keep doing the same thing over and over again. You change it to make it work. Parent involvement, I've said this all day, we have to have parent involvement. If they don't involve you, then they're not being good ABA providers and you need to go find another one. And then the last one is that we also work with other providers. We play nicely in the sandbox because we have to coordinate care for everybody that provides care to your loved one. And there's my contact. So if you're asking me a question about something completely unrelated, you can use my Gmail. If you have a question about how do I go about getting ABA services, you can use my work email. But if you have a question about the Florida Association for Behavior Analysis, then you can use my FABA email. And with that, I'll take questions. Oh my goodness, there's 9 new messages. So while we're doing this, I'm gonna,
Looks like Tony had a question about, are you able to identify the primary antagonist of ABA as a science or ABA as a professional field endeavor?
I'm not sure if you're asking about the negative things that are being said online. We know for a fact that the people are openly saying that they're autistic, and they're openly saying that they themselves were also abused. But I don't spend too much time on that side because I'm busy promoting what we do and promoting the ethical application of our science.
Okay, so it's not some other professionally licensed organizations. That's kind of what I was.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
no.
And if you couldn't say, I would understand too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
So we actually want to align with other organizations. AHCA, which is the Agency for Healthcare Administration, recently put out a requirement that the BCBA, well, they didn't say BCBAs had to do it, but what they did say is for anybody getting ABA through Medicaid, they wanted the children to have testing with the PPVT. The Vineland and the ABAS or another behavior, and the psychologist came forward and we don't think that the BCBA should do that. And we said, we don't think so either. And so we tried to tell ACA not to do it. And so we partnered with psychologists. We have licensure in 37 states. And in 36 of those states, the psychology board and or the social work board is in full support of us having our own license because.
Are you getting ready to move to the state of Florida and you?
Am I getting ready to move to the state of Florida?
I'm sorry, I was trying to put a link in, that was me.
Oh, that's okay. So we know we really do think there should be licensure because there are people that are calling themselves behavior analysts in Florida and they're not. And so I think this is also where bad things happen. In fact, the very first documented case of abuse happened in Florida at the Sunland Center. And so people came in, they investigated, and sure enough, that man was not qualified to deliver those interventions. And what did he do? He went to another state and became a college professor where he taught more people to do bad things.
Okay, so we have a
Thank you.
question. How long does it take to get ABA services?
It depends on how old your loved one is and where you live. Most healthcare in Florida covers it. Where it might not be covered is if you have a self-funded insurance plan. Self-funded plans are guided by federal law. And so there is no federal mandate to do this, although we're working on and advocating really hard for that. So self-funded plans don't have to do it. Medicaid does it only through age 21. I think we should challenge that. And no one has tried to get it through Medicare. I would have been the first, but I couldn't find a provider that would work with us.
So,
So most people are running waiting lists, but more and more providers are coming to Florida because there's a big need. And so some places might be able to take you tomorrow and other places might say, we can take you in 4 to 6 weeks. The entire process, you do the initial assessment, which can take about 2 weeks. And then we send your plan off to the insurance company and they either approve it or they don't approve it. And once they approve it, then you're ready to go. How do we challenge it? I think if you have a loved one over 21, I say you email me at that BCaBA address and I'll connect you to an attorney who would gladly take this on. You have to fight. Unfortunately, my mother taught me to fight from a very early age, but we know that the need for ABA does not stop at 18 or 21 or 25. It's another behavioral health service like anything else. And when you need it, you need it. Oh yeah, so in the handout, let me just pop the handout in here again, and Dina will send it out too. But in the handout at the top of every page is both of my emails, my BCaBA email and my AFL. Here's our little logo. Again, we're not in Florida yet. We're hoping to be in Florida in a few years, but we're not here yet. Oh, I'm so sorry, Kim. My brother's 43.
all right, do we have, I think we've covered, there is one question about Florida Health. If you've heard of that.
I don't know Florida Health, but I can certainly, get online and help you see if they cover it. But you just need to email me and I'll work with you separately.
Well, I don't see any more, but we certainly appreciate Melissa.
It was
taking
great
her
to see
time today,
everybody.
And we will be sharing all this information.
Okay, thanks
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.